Hello and welcome. Today we're talking about the examples for the light seasons. If you still haven't seen the video in which I talk about the color characteristics of the light types, here's the link to it. Something that I said in the last one, but I think it's important to avoid a misunderstanding, is that my videos do focus on black women and people on the dark skin spectrum, because being black does not mean that you're going to have very deep dark skin, and having dark skin does not mean that you're black. This is the video on the light seasons, so of course, this video will feature people on the lighter side on that scale. Here is a playlist with my videos on the other color seasons if you're interested in seeing that. I don't have as many examples for the light seasons. It gets really hard to distinguish cool versus warm because they do tend to be neutral, even more than the other seasons. But also because their pictures get edited, so they might look very warm in one but very cool in another. So what we're going to do is to talk about individual pictures. I'm not necessarily saying that this person is that season, but that someone that is a light spring or a light summer can look like that. If you're wondering what a darker light season would be, it would be more or less something like this picture. Still, I wouldn't necessarily consider her a light season. This is actually in one of my soft summer videos, I think. If you have noticed, there are no 3 seasons in my color system. I'll talk about that and why in my next video. But in the meantime, this would be what I would consider, for example, a true summer. She has a low contrast level and her features look blended, but she can handle colors that are a bit brighter than the ones of a pure soft summer, but they're going to be darker than a light summer. She looks somewhere in the middle, but leans a bit more towards the soft summer side, which is why she's in that video. First, we have Diandra Forrest. Let's talk about her characteristics. Diandra has albinism, so it is as light as it gets. According to the foundations she says that she wears, she is neutral warm. She also has green eyes and blonde hair. From her pictures, I have seen her wearing blondes that are a bit more on the red side, the yellow side, or even the white side. Hue and temperature. This is where it can get confusing with light types. She is neutral, but she looks very cool in some pictures and very warm in some others. Because she has a neutral undertone, she looks good in both cool and warm colors. She tends to go for neutral or neutral warm foundations, and then she goes for a pink cool concealer. Value. Her colors will be light, as a light spring in the traditional color system. Some things do change the darker your features get, but we'll be talking about that later. Her colors will be light because of her light features. She doesn't look as good in very dark colors. I don't know if you have seen this, but when someone has very light skin, very light eyes, and very light hair, if they dye their hair or their brows in very dark colors, it completely takes the spotlight because their natural coloring is a lot lighter than that. Chroma. She also has some brightness in her. Muted colors don't do much, and very bright colors can be too much. They don't look bad, but if you're like her, you might want to look for something in between. Something that is bright enough to make you pop, but not so bright that it ends up upstaging you. Let's take a look at those colors. Red. She looks good in red, but it can also be too bright if it's almost neon. In other pictures, it does look like she has been edited to look warmer. If she does look like this, the red on the first picture seems to be the least harsh on her, but it does look more like an autumn red. At least the upper half, not the bottom half. Maybe if the whole dress was in the shade of the bottom part, it would be perfect. Reds that are not super bright, like strawberry, and reds that are a bit more pink, are great for someone like her. She can also go deeper, like in the last picture. Orange and yellow. I didn't find many pictures of her in orange, but light oranges are very good colors for light springs. This would be peachy and apricot colors. Light yellows are also a good option even those burnt yellows, as long as they are on the lighter side. Green. Green is an amazing color for springs because it is a neutral color, in the sense that it is a neutral in the color wheel, not as in a fashion neutral. Because green is made up by a cool and a warm color, so technically it is both and neither. Regular spring greens look perfect on her. Bright greens can be a bit overwhelming, but not as much as you would think. If you start to see a pattern, when she wears neon colors, she tends to look a bit more pink, but that might be the lighting as well. Also, this green isn't bad, but it could be just a bit less bright. Blue. I couldn't find many pictures of her wearing blue either, but here we have a picture of her in this light blue outfit, and it looks amazing on her. Blue being a cool color also brings out a bit of the pink tones in her skin, but not as much as the bright red. We also have a darker purple and a lighter purple. Light seasons look amazing in pinks. This can be bolder pinks or softer and lighter pinks. Let's remember that light types look good in bright colors as long as they are not super bright for them. For example, the first pink is better than the last pink. Neutrals. Just like soft types, light types can look very good in neutrals. They will still look better when there's a pop of color to bring out their brightness. Peaches, beige, and cream are ideal. Darker colors like black can be trickier on light seasons because it is too strong. It's the complete opposite of the palette, being cool and dark, when they are light and warm. You can see it in the first picture, in which all of her colors harmonize with the coloring, but the very dark brows stand out a lot because it's incongruent with the rest of her colors. I saw a few comments saying that I grouped all of the light-skinned people in one single group, but it's not the case. It's just that I used the light type as a specific shade, technically. So we have the deep tones, the medium tones, and the light tones. Zendaya. In the spectrum of my skin tone chart, Zendaya has a light skin type. She has dark hazel eyes and dark brown hair. Now, let's see the characteristics of her colors. Hue or temperature. Just like Diandra, she wears a mix of cool and warm foundations. And with the colors that she looks great in, it seems like neutral warm is her overall undertone. Value. We talked about Diandra being the closest example to what would fit into the original light spring from the traditional color analysis systems. Zendaya is what I would consider a darker light spring in my system, because she has darker features. Chroma. I've seen Zendaya typed as a lot of seasons, but if we look at her in a wide range of colors, we can see that she does have some brightness in her, meaning that she looks very good in some bright colors, but other bright colors can be way too much. Darker colors can drain her coloring a little bit if they are way too intense, and muted colors don't do anything. We see her wearing red very often. Like we saw with Diandra, bright reds that are not extremely bright are ideal. We can see that in this slide. The first red being great for her, but the second one can take the spotlight. And in the last image, the bright coral red lipstick becomes the highlight of everything, since she is also wearing black. Deeper reds don't look bad on her either, since she does have darker features, and you can definitely see that autumn influence in her. But some of these colors can be too severe when you compare them to the other shades of red that are not as dark. Orange. Orange is a very strong color. Most springs will look very good in it. Since it is such a strong color, it can also be too bright. It's a bit hard to see how harsh this orange is on her. Of course, pictures get edited to make people on galas look their best, But the thing is that she looks very different in these 3 pictures. The reality is probably somewhere in the middle, but this dress seems to be too strong for her. Maybe not in the first picture, but if you see the other 2, the coloring of the dress seems to be too intense, and it would probably suit a clear spring better. It's not necessarily the fact that it's orange, but it's also that there is a lot of black in it. And we can see that because in here, she looks very good in these oranges. And they seem to be in the same range, but without the harshness of the black. This is another dress that can be confusing. In the first picture, if she looks like this, the dress is great. With other pictures of the standalone dress, it seems like it's supposed to be some sort of neon yellow shade. Like it happened with Diandra in one of the examples. The dress and the hue are not bad, but the color becomes the highlight instead of her. And depending on the lighting, it even seems like it grays her out a bit. Again, the reality is probably somewhere in the middle, and maybe the dress does not overwhelm her at all if she looks as warm as in the first one. In this second slide, we can see her wearing softer and less harsh yellows for the first 2 images. And in the last one, we can see her wearing a stronger yellow. Green is great for springs, and Zendaya's coloring has an autumn influence, especially when she has auburn hair. The green emerald dress looks perfect. I think this has been one of the best looks she has ever worn. The last green is more of an autumn green, but it's almost a bit too muted for her when you compare it to the other ones. Her being on the neutral side, blue also looks good on her. If your coloring is similar to Zendaya in these pictures, a regular blue like the one in the middle is a better option than the muted cool blue in the last picture, and it's also a better option than the first one that seems to be a little bit too harsh. Pink is a great color for light seasons, but some of them can be too bright for light springs, even when they have darker features. All of these are bright pinks, but the one in the middle is a bit warmer than the ones on the sides. The same goes for the breastplate look. This is a bright pink that is not as bright as the first ones. These other pinks are softer, they are light and not super bright. Neutrals are a safe option for light springs, but it can feel like there's something missing when there are no details. And not all neutrals are equally flattering. Her being warmer, grey can clash a bit with her image. Her Cinderella dress is gorgeous, and it looks like it's the highlight instead of her. But in this case, that's probably the point, so it doesn't really matter. But if you have a similar coloring to Zendaya, you might want to avoid wearing grey. Even when a color is technically warm, like beige, some of those neutrals can be a little bit cooler or a little bit more muted. Now we have Yara Shahidi. In the spectrum of my skin tone chart, she looks like she's in between light brown and brown, depending on how tan she is at the moment. She has dark brown eyes and very dark brown hair. Yara seems to be warmer than my previous examples. She is still able to wear some cool colors, but the very cool ones don't look as good as the warmer hues. Value. Her features being darker and warmer allow her to wear darker colors. When I found Yara, she immediately made me think that she was a spring, color seasons being a spectrum. She looked like she was between light spring and clear spring. Just like Kerry Washington, if you remember my clear spring examples videos, she is bright, but very bright colors are too much. From the pictures that I have seen, it looks like Kerry can handle dark colors a bit better than Yara, and it seems like she can go a bit brighter as well, which is why I typed her as a clear spring. But if I ended up making an in-between category, both Yara and Kerry would be in there. There are so many varieties of red that can be worn by light springs, especially if they have darker features that allow them to go brighter and or darker. Yara is warmer than the other women that we have seen. If you're like her, working with oranges is not going to be as hard. Just try to find one that isn't too muted but also not overly bright. Yellow can be very harsh, and it's more noticeable when she's lighter. When she's darker, it is a color that she can handle better. When she has darker skin, very pale and dusty yellow, like the one in the middle image, doesn't do much for her. Her saturation level is a lot higher than the saturation level of the garment that she's wearing. So it doesn't look bad, it just doesn't look great. Remember that saturation and value are not the same thing. A color can be light or dark, but also be more saturated at the same time, just like the ones in this next slide. With darker hair, darker eyes and darker skin than the other light types, she can handle darker pieces as well. Therefore, darker greens also look very well on her. Very pale and muted hues, however, are not the best option compared to the other greens that do mimic her slightly bright coloring a lot better. Let's remember that if you ignore one of your color characteristics, you should honor the other ones so that it doesn't clash as much. For example, if blue is a cool color, therefore a blue for Yara should be lighter. In this case, however, a blue being light is not enough. It should also be a bit more saturated for it to look better, and it shouldn't be muted. Here's another example of this. Lighter pinks that are more on the saturated side look great, but a light pink that is cool and also muted can clash with her. Here we have a variety of purples to emphasize that point. The last picture shows how she can handle darker colors as well because she has darker features. Still, as a cool color, green, yellows and oranges can be better options. Black is also not as overwhelming on her, especially in shinier materials. When you're a bit more comfortable with color theory, you can also play around with textures and materials to create different effects. Unfortunately, I don't have lots of pictures for an example of a light summer. I will come back to this when I find more, but in the meantime, here are a few pictures of Nontobeko Mbuyazi. She seems to be on the cooler side, since white does not clash on her as much as Diandra, and she also seems to be a bit more on the pink side. Summers are more on the neutral side, so they can also wear warmer colors without looking off. Overall, since they are cool and light, their color palette will be composed by cool, soft colors that are also a bit brighter than the colors on the soft summer palette. That would be it for today, and the next video should be about true seasons and why I don't use them in my system. You can hire me as your stylist at cocostyling.com. Have a nice day, and I hope to see you soon.